My husband's cousin put my face on a leadership slide and called me a warning. Not a guest, not a colleague, a warning. In front of active duty officers, retired Navy leaders, and community officials at Naval Station Norfolk. Lieutenant Caleb Harrow clicked to a photo of me from a family barbecue and said, "This is what happens when image gets ahead of experience." The room went quiet. My husband, Owen, froze beside me. Caleb smiled like he had finally won the argument he started at Thanksgiving. Then an old captain in the front row stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. He looked at the photo. Then he looked at me. And his face changed. "Who gave you permission to use her image?" he asked. Caleb laughed nervously. "Sir, it is just an example." The captain's voice dropped. "No, Lieutenant, that is not an example." He turned toward the room and said the name nobody in that family had bothered to ask about. "That is Jukebox." My name is Lieutenant Commander Leah Whitaker. 15 years in the United States Navy had taught me how to survive storms, emergencies, bad orders, long nights, and the kind of silence that comes after people realize they underestimated the wrong woman. But nothing in my training prepared me for the way disrespect sounds when it comes from family, especially when your husband hears it and chooses the floor over your face. The Harrows were a Navy family. That was what they told everyone. Every wall in their Chesapeake house seemed to carry a framed photo of someone in uniform, someone shaking hands with an officer, someone standing on a pier beside a ship, someone saluting under a flag. My husband, Owen Harrow, had served 6 years before leaving active duty for a civilian defence logistics job. His father had served. His uncle had served. His cousin Caleb was currently a lieutenant, and he wore that fact the way some men wear cologne, too much, too close, and meant to announce himself before he entered the room. To outsiders, the Harrows looked like a family built on honour. Inside that dining room, I learned honour was a word they liked more than a standard they lived by. It started on Thanksgiving. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, and the kind of old resentment people pass around with serving spoons. Owen and I arrived a little after noon. His mother hugged me tightly and told me I looked tired, which was her way of saying my face did not meet the holiday standard. His aunt kissed the air near my cheek and asked whether the Navy still let women wear their hair short, even though mine was pinned in regulation because I had come straight from duty watch the night before. Caleb was already in the living room, standing near the fireplace with a drink in his hand and a circle of relatives around him. He was telling a story about a joint readiness brief he had given that week. He saw me and lifted his glass. "There she is," he said, "the poster girl." A few people laughed. I looked at him. "Excuse me?" "Come on, Leah, you know what I mean. Recruiting material, clean uniform, good smile, makes the Navy look modern." I waited for Owen to say something. He did not. He looked down at the dish in his hands and carried it into the kitchen. That was the first cut. Caleb kept going. "I am not insulting you. It's just interesting how some careers get built now. Half performance, half optics." His father, Richard Harrow, looked up from his chair. Richard was a retired Command Master Chief. He was not loud. He did not need to be. Men like him carried authority in the way they sat still. "Careful, Caleb," he said. Caleb waved him off. "Dad, I'm talking about leadership culture, image management, perception. People get ahead because they become symbols." I said, "Is that what you think I am?" Caleb smiled. "I think you've done very well with the opportunities you were given." There are sentences designed to sound polite, only to the people not being struck by them. That was one. The room shifted. Owen came back and sat beside me, still silent. I looked at my husband, waiting. He reached for his water glass. Not my hand. Not my defence. His water glass. So I turned back to Caleb and said, 15 years is a long time to be given opportunities. He shrugged. Some people are good at being visible. Richard Harrow's eyes narrowed. Leah, he said quietly, did you have a call sign? The question landed strangely. Most of the family did not understand why it mattered. Caleb rolled his eyes. Dad, not every officer has some war movie nickname. Richard ignored him. He looked only at me. I hesitated. Not because I was ashamed, because some names carry nights inside them. Jukebox, I said. The room did not change. But Richard did. His mouth opened slightly. His back straightened. The old Master Chief was suddenly back in uniform somewhere behind his eyes. Jukebox, he repeated. I nodded once. Across the table, Caleb laughed. What is that supposed to mean? Richard did not look at his son. It means you should stop talking. The rest of Thanksgiving moved around me like a bad performance. People passed plates. Someone asked about football. Caleb made a joke about sensitive people. Owen squeezed my knee once under the table, as if that was supposed to repair the silence he had chosen when everyone could hear. I ate enough to avoid questions and left before dessert. In the car, Owen sighed before I even buckled my seatbelt. Please don't start. I turned to him slowly. Don't start what? Leah, your cousin called me a poster girl in front of your family. He was being obnoxious. He was questioning my career. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And you let him keep talking. Owen gripped the steering wheel. I didn't want to turn Thanksgiving into a fight. No, I said. You let me become the place where the fight ended. He flinched. I was trying to keep peace. Peace for who? He did not answer. That was another kind of answer. We drove home through quiet Virginia roads, past houses glowing with holiday lights and windows full of families who, at least from the outside, knew how to sit at tables without asking one woman to absorb everyone's cowardice. When we got home, I changed out of my clothes, hung my uniform for the next morning, and sat on the edge of the bed. Owen stood in the doorway. I am sorry he said that. I looked at him. Are you sorry he said it, or are you sorry I am upset? He opened his mouth, closed it, then said nothing. I nodded. That's what I thought. 2 days later, Richard Harrow called me. That alone was unusual. He had always been polite to me, but distant, a man who respected rank, structure, and quiet competence, but did not intrude. Commander Whitaker, he said. Master Chief? Retired, he corrected. Once a Master Chief, always dangerous. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. Then his voice changed. I owe you an apology. You don't. I do. My son embarrassed himself at that table. Worse, he disrespected you in my house. I said nothing. Richard continued. I should have stopped him earlier. You did more than anyone else. That is not the standard. There was the difference between Richard and the rest of them. He understood standards, not intentions, not excuses. Standards. He paused. Leah, I need to ask you something. The call sign, Jukebox, was that from the Gulf rotation 5 years ago? My fingers tightened around the phone. That operation is not something I discuss at family tables. Understood. Silence. Then he said, I heard the name once, from Captain Bill Maddox. The room around me seemed to shrink. Captain William Maddox. Most people knew him as a decorated surface warfare officer, a guest speaker, a man who had survived an incident no one described in detail. I knew him as a voice on a damaged radio at 0217 hours, bleeding somewhere in a dark sea lane, while 3 screens in front of me showed bad options and one narrow path home. How do you know Captain Maddox? I asked. We served in overlapping commands years ago. He mentioned Jukebox at a retirement dinner, said he was alive because somebody refused to let panic make the decision. I stared at the wall. The past does not always return loudly. Sometimes it returns as a retired Master Chief saying a name over the phone. Richard lowered his voice. Caleb has been talking about you for years. I closed my eyes. What kind of talking? The kind that makes a small man feel taller. There it was. The truth had not begun at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving had only been the first time he said it, where I could hear. Caleb Harrow had always been charming in public. He knew how to laugh at senior officers' jokes, how to say the right phrases in leadership circles, how to make ambition sound like service. He had the kind of confidence that photographs well and collapses under pressure. I had never competed with him. That was the strange part. I had not taken a billet from him. I had not corrected him in public. I had not reviewed his work, blocked his promotion, or interfered with his career. But to him, my existence became an accusation. A woman in the family who outranked him. A woman with operational history he could not explain away. A woman who did not need to advertise the things he wanted people to assume about him. Richard said, he has told people you benefited from image politics. Did Owen know? A pause. I think Owen heard more than he wanted to deal with. That hurt more than the answer itself, because I knew it was true. Owen did not hate conflict. He hated being required to choose a side when silence protected him. Richard said, there is something else. I waited. Caleb is presenting at the Joint Readiness Leadership Luncheon next week at Norfolk. I know the event. He told me he is using examples about perception versus performance. My stomach tightened. Why are you telling me? Because I saw his draft on his laptop when he came by yesterday. Richard breathed out slowly. He has a photo of you in it? The photo was from a family barbecue 2 years earlier. I remembered the day because Owen had burned the burgers and blamed the grill. I had been wearing jeans, a navy blue blouse, and sunglasses pushed into my hair. Someone had taken a candid picture of me standing near the deck, laughing at something one of the kids had said. Caleb had taken that photo and built a slide around it. Richard read me the caption. Perception versus performance, when image gets ahead of experience. For a second, I could not speak. It is one thing to insult someone over turkey and sweet potatoes. It is another thing to carry that insult into a military professional setting, dress it up as leadership instruction, and use a woman's face as a target because you think family gives you ownership of her dignity. Has anyone reviewed it? I asked. The event coordinator flagged it. Good. He argued. Of course he did. Leah, I told him to remove it. And? He told me I was too old to understand modern leadership branding. Despite everything, I almost smiled. That sounds like Caleb. Richard's voice hardened. It sounds like a lieutenant who needs correction. I said, do not intervene further. Commander? I mean it. If he chooses to use my image in a professional forum after being warned, then I want him to make that choice in front of witnesses." Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You are setting a boundary." "No," I said. "I am letting him find the one that already exists." I told Owen that night. He sat at the kitchen table while I stood across from him with my arms folded. At first, he looked confused, then embarrassed, then defensive. Maybe Richard misunderstood. Your father read the caption. Caleb can be dramatic with drafts. It doesn't mean he will actually use it. The coordinator told him to remove it. Owen rubbed his face. I'll talk to him. Now? Yes. Why now? He looked at me. What do you mean? I mean, why are you willing to talk to him now that it may become public, but not when he insulted me in front of your family? His shoulders dropped. Leah? No, answer me. He stared at the table. Because at dinner I thought if I ignored it, it would pass. And now? Now it won't. I nodded. That is the difference between peace and avoidance. Peace requires courage. Avoidance waits until someone else pays the price. He looked ashamed. Good. Shame is not always useless. Sometimes it is the first honest room a person enters. Owen said, I failed you. Yes. The word sat between us. He did not argue with it. That mattered. I don't know how to fix it, he said. Start by not asking me to make your family comfortable with disrespecting me. He nodded. And if Caleb uses the slide, then he will own the consequences. Are you going to the luncheon? Yes. He looked up sharply. Leah, that could get ugly. It already is ugly. The difference is whether everyone gets to see it clearly. The morning of the Joint Readiness Leadership Luncheon was bright and cold. Naval Station Norfolk carried its usual rhythm, vehicles moving through gates, uniforms crossing parking lots, gulls crying over grey water, flags snapping hard in the wind. I wore service dress blues, not because I needed armour, because I wanted Caleb to understand the difference between a family photograph and the officer he had chosen to misrepresent. Owen drove separately. He said he needed time to think. I let him have it. At the registration table, the coordinator, a civilian named Marlene Hayes, looked relieved and horrified when she saw me. Commander Whitaker? Miss Hayes. I am so sorry. Did he keep the slide? She hesitated. Lieutenant Harrow submitted a revised deck. With the photo? Her silence answered. I flagged it again, she said. He insisted it was anonymized enough. My face is visible. Yes. And my permission was not requested. No. Thank you for documenting that. She looked at me differently then. Not as a guest caught in an awkward situation. As an officer building a record. Everything is in email, she said. Good. I entered the hall. Tables filled with officers, senior enlisted leaders, civilians, retired service members, and a few local leadership program guests. At the front, a screen displayed the event title, Leadership Under Pressure, Image, Integrity, and Readiness. I almost laughed. Some rooms write their own irony. Captain William Maddox sat in the front row. I saw him before he saw me. He was older now, silver at the temples, the same straight posture, the same eyes that had learned long ago that survival is not a theory. He turned as if he felt me looking. For a moment, his face was polite and uncertain. Then recognition struck. He stood. Jukebox. The word was quiet. Only the nearest tables heard it. I walked toward him. Captain Maddox? He took my hand in both of his. You never told me you were stationed in the area. You never asked. He smiled, but his eyes were wet. I have been trying for years to find the right channel to thank you without getting 6 classification officers angry at me. That sounds like a wise concern. He laughed softly. Then he looked toward the podium. Are you presenting? No. Something in my voice made him study me. Then why do I suddenly feel like this luncheon is going to become educational? Because it is. Caleb began well. That was important. He was not stupid. Stupid men are easier to stop. Caleb spoke with confidence about leadership optics, trust, team credibility, and the danger of confusing visibility with competence. Some of his points were not wrong. That made the coming distortion worse. Bad leaders often hide inside good language. He clicked through slides showing stock images, famous case studies, anonymous organizational examples. Then he paused. This next example is more personal, he said. The slide changed. My face filled the screen. A barbecue photo, cropped, brightened, stripped of context. Below it, in bold letters, the caption read, Perception versus performance, when image gets ahead of experience. A murmur moved through the room. Owen went rigid at the table beside me. Marlene Hayes, standing near the wall, closed her eyes briefly. Caleb continued, In modern institutions, we sometimes elevate individuals because they represent what an organization wants to project, rather than because their record supports the perception. I stood. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just enough that chairs near me shifted. Caleb stopped. His eyes found mine. For the first time that morning, his confidence flickered. I said, Lieutenant Harrow, did you request permission to use my image in this presentation? The room turned toward me. Caleb smiled tightly. This is a professional discussion, Commander. That was not my question. A few heads moved. Officers recognize when a question has been evaded. I repeated it. Did you request permission to use my image? No, he said, but the image was from a family event. Does a family event give you professional authorization to use my likeness in a military leadership presentation? His jaw tightened. It is an illustrative example. Did the event coordinator flag the slide as inappropriate? Marlene looked down at her clipboard. Caleb said, There was a discussion. Did she ask you to remove it? Silence. I let the silence work. Then I said, Did you verify the performance record of the officer whose image you are using to claim image exceeded experience? Caleb's face reddened. Commander, with respect, this is not about you personally. It became about me personally when you put my face on the screen. Owen stood then. Finally. Take it down, Caleb. Caleb turned toward him. Owen, sit down. No, take down the slide. The room held its breath. I did not look at my husband. Not yet. This was the first time he had chosen discomfort before it became convenient. Caleb laughed bitterly. Of course, now everyone is emotional. Richard Harrow stood from a table near the front. His voice was low, but it carried, Son, you have confused attention with respect. Caleb looked like he had been slapped. Dad. Richard continued, I warned you. This is my presentation. No, Richard said, this is your arrogance with a projector. A few people shifted. Caleb tried to recover. With all due respect, Master Chief, leadership requires the courage to discuss uncomfortable truths. Captain Maddox rose slowly. The room changed. It was not his rank alone. It was the way people responded to a man who did not stand unless standing mattered. "Then let us discuss truth," he said. Caleb went still. Captain Maddox turned toward the audience. "That officer on the screen is Lieutenant Commander Leah Whitaker." I could hear my own heartbeat. Maddox continued. "Some of us know her by another name." He looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. He faced the room again. "Jukebox?" The name moved through the room like a current. Richard bowed his head once, as if confirming something he had already known. Caleb looked confused. Maddox said, "I owe my life to the officer you just used as a negative example." No one spoke. Maddox stepped into the aisle. "I will be careful, because some details are not mine to disclose. But years ago, during a very bad night in a very unforgiving piece of water, our team lost primary navigation, 2 communications channels, and the confidence of several people who believed extraction was no longer possible." His voice remained steady. Commander Whitaker was not the loudest person on the net. She was not performing for cameras. She was not managing an image. She was listening to broken transmissions, conflicting sensor data, and men who were running out of time. He looked directly at Caleb. She made decisions that brought people home. The room was utterly still. Maddox's voice sharpened. "I came home because of those decisions." My throat tightened, but my face did not change. 15 years in uniform teaches you where to place grief until the room can survive it. Maddox continued, "And I was not the only one." He pointed to the screen. "So before you stand in front of officers and tell them that image got ahead of her experience, you should understand this. Her experience is the reason some of us are alive to sit in this room and listen to you embarrass yourself." Caleb's mouth opened. No words came. Maddox turned to Marlene. "Please remove the slide." Marlene did. The screen went black. And somehow the blank screen said more than the photo ever had. The luncheon did not end immediately. That would have been easier for Caleb. Instead, Captain Maddox asked the room whether they wanted to discuss the difference between performance and performance theatre. Nobody objected. For the next 20 minutes, the event became what it should have been from the beginning. A discussion about humility, verification, consent, professional respect, the misuse of personal information, the danger of turning resentment into instruction. Caleb sat near the podium, pale and silent. Owen remained standing until I sat down. Then he sat beside me, not touching me, not trying to claim forgiveness through contact. That was wise. Richard Harrow did not look at his son. At the end, Marlene returned to the microphone and said the command would review presentation protocols for future events. That was formal language. Everyone understood what it meant. Caleb's leadership luncheon had become an incident. Not because I had exposed him, because he had exposed himself. In the hallway afterward, Caleb tried to reach me before anyone else did. "Leah." I kept walking. He followed. "Commander?" That made me stop. Not because he deserved my attention, because he had finally remembered the rank he had spent years minimizing. I turned. He looked smaller without the podium. I didn't know about Maddox. "No," I said, "you didn't." If I had known. That is the problem. You did not know, and you still felt qualified to judge. His face tightened. I was making a broader point. You used my face. It was not meant to be personal. Caleb, you took a personal resentment, put it on a military slide, ignored a coordinator's warning, and presented me as a professional failure in front of my peers. He swallowed. That sounds worse when you say it like that. It sounds accurate when I say it like that. Richard walked up behind him. Apologize properly, he said. Caleb's jaw flexed. Dad, not now. Richard's eyes hardened. Then when? After the command review? After your promotion board asks why your judgment failed in public? After every person in that room remembers you as the man who tried to humiliate Jukebox and had to be corrected by the man she saved? Caleb looked at me. For a second, I saw the envy under the arrogance. It was not flattering. It was pathetic. He said, I am sorry. I waited. He added, for using the photo. I continued waiting. His eyes dropped. And for implying your career was based on image. And? He looked confused. I said, and for doing it because you were jealous. His face flushed. Richard inhaled. Owen, who had joined us quietly, looked at Caleb. Caleb said nothing. So I said, then we are not done. I walked away. Owen found me near the parking lot. The wind off the water was cold enough to make my eyes sting, though I told myself that was the only reason they did. He stopped a few feet away. I should have stood up at Thanksgiving. Yes. I should have stopped him years ago. Yes. I heard things and told myself ignoring them was not the same as agreeing. I looked at him then. And now? Now I understand silence gave him room. That answer mattered. Not enough to fix everything, but enough to be real. He said, I am sorry. I had heard those words from him before. This time I asked, what changes? He nodded, as if he had expected that. I told my family we will not attend gatherings where you are disrespected. I told Caleb not to contact you unless it is a real apology. I told my mother I am done calling avoidance peace. I studied him. Did you say that before or after the captain spoke? He closed his eyes. After, I started to turn away. But I should have said it before, he added, and I know that means the first step is mine, not yours. I stopped. He continued, I do not get to ask you to trust a sentence. I have to give you change behaviour long enough for trust to decide whether it wants to come back. I hated that part of me was relieved. Not because he deserved easy forgiveness. Because I still loved him, and love becomes complicated when someone hurts you through cowardice instead of cruelty. I am not ready to make you feel better, I said. He nodded. I know. Good. The consequences for Caleb were not dramatic enough for television. No one dragged him away. No one tore rank from his uniform. Real consequences are usually quieter and more durable. His chain of command requested the full presentation file, the coordinator's emails, and written statements from attendees. The phrase poor judgment appeared more than once. So did misuse of personal image and unprofessional conduct. His promotion package did not move that year. He was removed from 2 leadership outreach events. He received what the Navy calls corrective mentorship, a phrase that sounds gentle until you are the officer being mentored by people who no longer trust your judgment. The Harrow family tried to manage the story. At first, Owen's mother said everyone had misunderstood. Then Richard told her to stop. At Sunday dinner, 2 weeks later, with half the same relatives present, Richard placed his fork down and said, "My son dishonoured himself. We do not repair that by pretending Leah was too sensitive." Nobody argued. That was new. Owen told me afterward. I asked if he had spoken. He said yes. "What did you say?" "I said I helped create the problem by staying quiet." That was also new. I did not reward him for it. But I remembered. 3 months later, Caleb called. I almost did not answer. Then I thought of all the people who had taught me that accountability without an audience is worth more than humiliation in public. So I picked up Commander Whitaker. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I deserve that." I said nothing. I have been working with Captain Sloane on leadership remediation. Good. I have also been speaking with my father. Also good. He exhaled. "I used you to make myself feel bigger." There it was. Not perfect. Not enough. But honest. He continued. "I told myself your career was image, because admitting it was competence meant admitting I was behind you. Not because you took anything from me. Because you had earned something I wanted people to believe I had already earned." I sat at my desk, looking at the grey afternoon beyond my office window. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I owed you the truth without making you drag it out of me." That answer surprised me. He said, "I am sorry for what I said at Thanksgiving. I am sorry for the slide. I am sorry for using a family photo as if your dignity was mine to spend. And I am sorry for disrespecting the uniform by pretending my insecurity was leadership." I let the silence sit. Then I said, "Thank you for saying that." His breath caught slightly. "Does that mean—" "It means thank you for saying that." He stopped. For once, he did not push for more than he had earned. That was the first sign of growth. 6 months after the luncheon, Captain Maddox invited me to speak at a closed professional development session. The topic was not image. It was decision-making under uncertainty. I almost declined. Not because I was afraid, because I have never liked turning survival into inspiration. But Maddox said something that changed my mind. "People keep learning the wrong lesson from stories like ours," he told me. "They think courage is loud. They need to hear from someone who knows courage is often procedural." So I went. I stood in a room of young officers and senior enlisted leaders and spoke about fractured information, stress, radio discipline, and the danger of needing to be seen as right more than needing to make the right decision. I did not tell them everything. I did not need to. Afterward, a young lieutenant approached me. She waited until others moved away. "Ma'am," she said, "how do you handle people assuming your success is optics?" I looked at her and saw every woman who had ever been told she was lucky, symbolic, promoted for image, visible for reasons other than competence. I said, "You document your work. You know your record. You do not argue with every insecure person who needs to shrink you. But when they cross a professional line, you make the line visible." She nodded slowly. "And if it is family?" I thought of Thanksgiving. Owen's silence. Caleb's slide. Richard's warning. Maddox standing in the aisle. Then you remember that family does not have a special license to dishonour you. She wrote that down. I hoped she would not need it. I knew she probably would. Owen and I rebuilt slowly, not with one apology, not with one public stand, with small repetitions. He corrected his mother when she tried to minimize the event. He ended a phone call when Caleb's name became an excuse for what happened. He came with me to counselling even when the sessions made him look at parts of himself he preferred to call easygoing. One night, nearly a year after Thanksgiving, we stood in our kitchen while rain hit the windows. He said, "I used to think I was keeping peace because I was calm. I waited. But I think I was only keeping myself safe." That was the kind of sentence that does not sound dramatic, but can change a marriage if the person saying it means it. I said, "Yes." He nodded. "I am sorry it took me so long to understand the difference." "So am I." He looked at me. "I know you may never fully trust me the way you did before." "Trust does not come back to the same house," I said. "If it comes back, it builds a new one." He reached for my hand, slowly enough that I could refuse. I did not. That was not forgiveness. Not completely. It was a door left unlocked. There is a difference. People later tried to turn the Norfolk incident into a simple story. Jealous lieutenant humiliates respected officer. Decorated captain reveals truth. Family learns lesson. But real life is messier than that. Caleb did not become humble overnight. Owen did not become brave in every room immediately. The Harrows did not transform into a family of perfect accountability. And I did not become untouched by what happened just because the truth came out. I still remembered the Thanksgiving table, the laughter, the way my husband's eyes dropped, the slide, the caption, perception versus performance. When image gets ahead of experience, I kept a printed copy of that slide in a folder. Not because I needed to punish myself, because evidence has a way of protecting memory from people who prefer edited versions. Under it, I placed a note from Captain Maddox. One sentence. Performance brought me home. That was enough. Honour is not something people give you when they finally understand your resume. Honour is not applause. It is not a call sign. It is not a captain standing up in a crowded room, though I will always be grateful that he did. Honour is what remains when someone tries to make you smaller and you do not help them. It is what you carry when your family chooses comfort over courage. It is what tells you to stand when your face is on a screen and your work is being rewritten by someone who never bothered to learn it. At Thanksgiving, Caleb called me a poster girl. At Norfolk, he called me an example. But the truth had a longer memory than his arrogance. Captain Maddox remembered the night I made the decisions that brought him home. Richard Harrow remembered that respect is owed before embarrassment forces it. Owen finally learned that silence is not peace when it leaves your wife alone in the fire. And I learned something too. I learned that I do not need every room to know what I have survived. But I will not allow any room to use my silence as permission. Caleb wanted to teach leadership by humiliating me. Instead, he taught the room something else. That insecurity is not insight. That image is not evidence. That family does not own your dignity. And that sometimes the quietest officer in the room is the one everybody should have asked about first.